Now, one of the lines which is becoming very trendy at the moment is quite an unusual one. It's the line which is popularized by Grandmaster Anish Giri, now one of the top players in the world. So after e4, c5, knight f3, Anish Giri played a lot of games with the following move order: e6, d4, takes, knight c6, knight c3, a6, bishop e3, queen c7. Well, I mean, how exactly black reaches this position is probably not as relevant for us. Of course, on each turn there are viable alternatives for both sides, but the position which is becoming trendy is the following one. White plays queen f3. Now, if you are a seasoned player, then probably you know that this is not the most traditional setup, so to speak. White usually continues, once he goes bishop e3, usually continues with something like queen d2, castles long, or he goes back into some other lines with, say, bishop e2. Queen f3 is something extremely modern. They didn't play chess like this 20 years ago, but now in the Sicilian, white tries every single square for the white queen, and sometimes moves like queen f3, queen e2, queen d3, all sorts of moves which just did not exist before start getting popular. One of the reasons behind this strange queen f3, strange because the white pawn is still on f2, is basically the fast development. White goes queen f3 and then castles long, whereas with the queen on d2, okay, there are some additional problems of the pin, bishop b4 and whatnot. So white plays queen f3. On the downside of queen f3 is, of course, the immediate vulnerability of the queen on f3. But by now this line has huge amounts of theory, and apparently, well, at least that's what specialists tell me, this line was doing quite well for white. And then Anish Giri in the autumn of 2014, in fact, in Tashkent, my home city, against Karyakin, played knight e5. Well, this is nothing unusual, but he followed up with queen g3 and h5. And I think back then it was a new idea, and since then, as I said, this line has become quite trendy, and Anish Giri himself played several games, and there were some others, of course, who picked it up as well. Now, the reason for h5 is quite simple. Black wants to keep on harassing the white queen, and of course there is also a drawback to this. Drawback being, of course, that black somewhat neglects his development, and of course that's why this is also a pretty risky and an ambitious approach as well. So when facing it for the first time, his opponent, Grandmaster Karyakin, played f3, which is quite an understandable approach, but surprisingly enough, it didn't find many followers. I mean, f3 is an understandable approach because given the fact that black pawn is trying to harass the white queen, Karyakin finds a very safe square for the queen on f2, where the pawn on f3 is also useful to defend the square g4 against any possible attacks there. And in the game, Karyakin was very successful. After f3, b5, castles, d6. Somehow Anish was not convincing in the opening in this game. And then after f4, knight g4 and e5, very soon it was clear that white is seriously better, and he went on to win quite a nice game. But despite this, immediately after the game, Karyakin told me that Anish came up with a new and seemingly very good idea. So I got curious, and F3 didn't find many followers. So I'm actually not sure exactly why, but it's quite possible that after F3 H4, Queen F2, maybe Bishop A3 or Bishop B4, it's possible that complications are decent for black. So after Bishop B4, maybe Bishop D2, Bishop C5, castles, Knight F6, it is possible that black gets some counterplay. At least, as I said, F3 did not find many followers, and white started looking for other ways to play against H5. One of the spectacular lines is if black would continue Bishop A3. Also a pretty typical shot for this variation. Black uses the vulnerability of the white knight on C3 and tries to unsettle the white's position and above all prevent castling long. And here it seems that white has some tactical shots. Any knight to B5, in fact, takes, Queen A5, and now this gets extremely complicated. For instance, after Bishop D2, Bishop B4, takes, C3, Queen A4, Knight D6, King E7, Rook D1, and black plays a move Rook H5, fighting against possible threats of Queen C5, and basically it all remains extremely murky, with white having compensation for the sacrificed piece, but something like this really requires detailed analysis. But as I said, F3 never got popular, and Anish Giri continued to play this line with H5, which of course leads us to believe that he did some analysis and was probably convinced that F3 is not a threat to his position. So the other ways for white to continue include castling long, also pretty natural, pretty straightforward. The move Bishop F4 is a reasonably new attempt, also in the vein of providing some space for the white queen. Now white queen has a square E3, and also gives the additional support to the knight on C3, which we saw could be tactically important. Later, also Shahryar Mamydyarov came up with a spectacular piece sacrifice against the same Anish Giri, but in that game Anish Giri was prepared and faced this sacrifice with confidence. Well, there are some details here, and let's take a closer look at this line, which is becoming incredibly trendy at the moment, in our next video.